I will do that again. Doc with A, good morning, everyone. My name is Veronica Hirsch. I'm Charles Ananda from my mother, I'm sure, Call Apache. And I'm thrilled to be participating with you in this session today. Thank you so much for your patience. So in my role at the College Fund, I serve as the Student Programs Administrator within the Career Readiness and Employment space. And I'm joined by my colleague and supervisor, Mr. Jack Soto. Jack, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Good morning, everyone. There might be a lag between Veronica and I because she cannot hear us and I am typing to her in real time. So we will be moving back and forth between this tool and another tool. But I'm Jack Soto. I'm Navajo Kokapa. I am the Senior Program Manager for Career Readiness and Employment here at the College Fund. And we are very appreciative of you all being with us today and look forward to our session. Back to you, Veronica.
Okay, so again, technology being fun as it is, unfortunately, I can't hear anyone, but hopefully you can hear me. And so we're going to go through this slideshow presentation. I think this is an example in action of how we pivot when we encounter obstacles. And those are likely to come up. So with that, we're going to be very positive in this session. Please feel free to type any questions that you have in our chat. Thankfully, my colleague Jack is going to be moderating that and communicating with me in another way. So we're going to make this work. So welcome to this session. As you can see, the title is Professional Planning 101. And this session is really focused on how to make the most of your resume. The resume is really an important document. As we know, anytime we're applying for a particular job opportunity, oftentimes we're required to provide a resume for an internship or scholarship or fellowship. It's also helpful to think about the information you'd like to include on your resume when you create professional social media profiles. We'll talk about that briefly during this presentation as well. So really, this presentation is designed to invite you to think about what you feel is most important to convey about yourself when you are considering applying, let's say, for employment, an internship, a scholarship, a fellowship, and so on. So with that, we're going to dive right in. And really, your resume has a few goals, and this is what these goals are. So some of them include really engaging your reader or your potential interviewer, because really the ultimate goal of the resume, as you can see at the bottom, skipping down, is to secure an interview. Very often, an employment screening or hiring process, an internship or scholarship or fellowship review process involves that type of stage one. And the stage one includes applying for the position. There might be an online application that you have to fill out, in addition to providing a current, up-to-date resume that really relates and demonstrates how your skills directly meet and hopefully portray you as the ideal or the dream candidate for that particular job, internship, scholarship, or fellowship. So with that in mind, we want to be able to engage our reader. Now, there's various schools of thought about the types of formats, and I'll leave that to your discretion. But we do know, just from some industry information that has been collected over the years, that we all have about 6 minutes to capture our reader or our prospective interviewer's attention in that resume. So it's important that we ensure that the information that we provide is accurate, that it appropriately conveys who we are and what we're about, what we have to offer, and how we can do that in a way that is authentic. It doesn't feel like we're putting on a face or a persona or a mask, but we really are presenting our best self that demonstrates we have the intelligence, the skills, the ability, and even the passion to fulfill the expectations, let's say, of that particular job, that internship, that scholarship, or that fellowship. So as I mentioned, it's important that we share our professional story in a way that is sincere, that demonstrates our integrity as human beings. I would never encourage anyone to oversell or exaggerate your skills. You have enough intelligence, you have enough skills to be honest about what those are. So it's really about presenting yourself using your authentic voice and being really able to demonstrate how you are that perfect fit. So we want to make sure that we highlight your skills and accomplishments. Your resume is not the time to be overly modest. Your resume is the time to be very honest about those skills and accomplishments. And I realize that it sometimes may be hard for some of us to detail some of those. That's why I encourage people that when you are drafting your resume for the first time or you're updating it, to meet the specifications of a particular job, internship, scholarship, or fellowship, that you have somebody who you trust to read your resume, because that person can maybe remind you of things that you might have forgotten, certain skills or accomplishments, or remember that one time you went that one place and you did that one thing. That's always very helpful when we have somebody we can trust who can provide us that kind of feedback. And as I said, the ultimate goal of this resume, besides securing that interview, is hopefully being offered, let's say, that job or that internship opportunity, or being awarded that scholarship or that fellowship. And as I mentioned, within that 6-second resume test, it's important to have certain key information that is readily available and visible to whoever is reading and reviewing your resume. And so some of those things include accurate and up-to-date contact information. One of those things would include a professional email address. Now, you might have more than one. I myself do. So I have a Gmail address. I don't mind sharing it with you. It's drhirsch@gmail.com. And that's an address I've had now for probably close to about 16 or 17 years, a really long time. I'm dating myself. But that's an email address that follows me. So regardless of wherever I'm employed or what schools I've attended or organizations I've worked for, that is a professional email address that is consistent that I will always keep. So I choose to have a professional email address that accurately directs back to myself. So I have the initial of my first and my middle name, my last name is simply at Gmail. Realizing now, let's say if you open a Gmail account, if you don't have one yet, you might have to include maybe, let's say, your first and middle initials if you have a middle name, your last name, but you might have to include a number because somebody might already have that particular email address. Again, I'm dating myself. I've had this, feels like this email address for a million years. So I guess I'm the first drhirsch@gmail.com. But it's important to have that professional email address. So maybe not something like, I don't know, Avatar the Last Airbender 123@gmail.com is not necessarily a professional email address. So you want to consider, if you need to update your email address to, I'm going to say in air quotes, a boring yet professional email address, I encourage you to do so. You also want to make sure that you have a phone number. And with that, there are many times, just even in my own experience, where I've tried to contact individuals and I realize that this is the correct contact number for that person, but they don't have a voicemail message turned on. And very often, I'm sure you've gotten that prompt, this user has not set up their voicemail box. So if you have the voicemail capability on your phone number, whether it's a landline or a mobile number, please be sure to update that voicemail message. Make sure you set it up, make sure you update it, make sure it's professional in nature, especially if you are submitting this resume, you're putting that information, we'll say, out into the universe. You probably don't want to have a voicemail message that is maybe directed to your closest friends or family where you have inside jokes or a certain type of music, but rather, again, I'm going to say in air quotes, a boring yet accurate and straightforward voicemail message. You also might want to consider setting up a LinkedIn profile. And it's important to update your profile. And I had to take my own advice. So just this morning, I updated my LinkedIn profile, which I will be happy to share with you. Very often, it's helpful for your LinkedIn profile to mirror or to replicate the information that you have that you're putting, again, out into the universe on your resume, so that there's not some type of weird disconnect between this professional persona that you're presenting on your resume and this type of professional social media presence that you have online. More and more, I find in my adventures out into the world, among different colleagues, various organizations and institutions across the country, that it's a type of standard practice. It's become so for people to share that type of professional social media presence via their LinkedIn profile. So I encourage you to consider that. And it's very often that within that first initial part of your contact information that you can even include the link to your LinkedIn profile as well. The executive summary is about 2 to 4 lines, and you might consider answering some of these questions as you compose those 2 to 4 lines. Why are you qualified? What makes you a good candidate, and how have you effectively used those qualifications in previous jobs? So you don't want to take too much time to address that. If you can get it down to 2 lines, that's fantastic. But really getting at the heart of the matter, knowing that we only have 6 seconds to make what we hope is a really positive impression. It's important to list your education, education, your degrees. You can include your degree in progress if you're still in school and pursuing, whatever that degree may be. It's important to also include maybe any awards or fellowships or scholarships that you've gotten related to that degree. So in one of my previous experiences attending the University of Idaho as a graduate student for my professional science master's degree, I was very blessed to be awarded a National Science Foundation fellowship. So that's something that I include in that section about my education, about earning that degree, is that I was this National Science Foundation fellowship awardee. It also, again, it showcases and highlights all the skills and talents that you have. Professional skills, I like to include this section immediately after or sometimes even before my education. Again, we have 6 seconds to make that good impression. Some job descriptions, some internship descriptions might have certain criteria where they say a minimum of 3 years experience, let's say working with a particular type of software. So it could say minimum 3 years experience programming in Python. Or it could say a minimum 2 years experience of working with GIS, which is a geographical information system software. And so instead of requiring that person who is looking at my resume for 6 seconds to look through my job descriptions and maybe do some math and add up my number of years, I do it for them. So I will say in my professional skills the number of years and my expertise level, let's say in that particular software or that particular type of theory or whatever the case may be. So in my case, I have here as an example, I might say, this is just as an example, 3 years of public speaking experiences to audiences of 20 plus people. That could be something. As you see in that, I'm giving the number of years of experience I have in a specific area. I'm even telling people the type of audience, because technically my audience could have been my cat, and very often it is. But in this case, I'm saying an audience, let's say, of 20 plus people, or I might even say an audience of 2,000, or whatever the case may be, whatever is demonstrating, let's say that I have that skill, that talent that directly relates to the position for which I'm applying. You see this other example as well, 4 years of intermediate level Microsoft Office software expertise. I'm being honest about, let's say, my expertise level. I'm not saying I'm advanced unless I am. But if I feel like, hey, I can do more than just the basics, then I'm going to call that intermediate level. And again, give the number of years, letting people know right up. I'm not requiring them to do the math on my resume. Again, as I said, especially if there's certain minimum requirements of a certain amount of years or months or what have you, I'm doing that for them up front. And let's see, we'll go on to the next slide here, or we're going to try to go on to the next slide, hopefully. The other aspect for resumes, as we mentioned, the goals of resumes, has to do with sharing our professional story. And as I mentioned before, being able to share that story, to be able to present yourself authentically is so important. And so part of that can be very helpful is really just thinking about what your core values are. What matters most to you, above and apart from a job. But of course, as relates, let's say, to the particular position. Let's say it's a job vacancy that you're applying for, a scholarship, a fellowship, an internship. And so part of thinking about that, about your core values, is also very helpful to look at that organization's, let's say, website, that likely somewhere in a section that says about us or meet our team or something like that, gives a little bit of background and insight into that organization or that scholarship awarding institution or entity. It gives a little bit of history about who they are, what they're about, and what their core values are. Once you first identify your core values, it's very helpful then to think about how they align, let's say, with the core values that are for that particular job or that particular internship, scholarship, or fellowship. That way you can demonstrate how what you have to offer really directly aligns with what that prospective employer or organization has to offer. And again, if there's not maybe a direct connection, I encourage people, don't try to exaggerate. Again, maintain that spirit of integrity and authenticity, because that's really going to come through when, as we hope, the ultimate goal of somebody looking at your resume for those 6 seconds saying, hey, I got to bring this person in for an interview. So it's important that we start out from the very beginning with our resume with that spirit of integrity and authenticity. Getting down to point 3, as you can see, is sharing your professional story. It's important to think about the scope and the scale of your professional goals. and to be honest about those. If your scope or scale, for whatever reason, is, I want to become a vice president of something, that's wonderful. Or I want to become CEO of something, that's great. If your goals are different from that, I love supporting people who are in positions of CEO or vice presidency or chief financial officer, but I don't necessarily want to be that. That is not any indication of lack of motivation on your part or lack of intelligence or incentive. It's very honest about what you want to do because, as we realize, for a lot of positions that are of those increasing levels of responsibility, supervisory responsibility, public facing responsibility, there are likely higher and higher demands on time. And so it's important, again, as you think about your core values, how they align with that organization. Where are you at in your life? Are you in a position in your life where you're like, do I want to devote a significant amount of time, let's say, to furthering my education? Maybe I want to earn an additional degree. Am I at a point in my life, let's say, where I'm doing caregiving for my own children, for a relative's children, for siblings, for parents, for grandparents? Do I have these other significant demands on my time? Am I navigating maybe some certain health issues that, while not, thankfully not life-threatening, but are significant in nature, and maybe I need to monitor my stress levels. Maybe I need to also prioritize that. It's important that we reflect upon where we are in our lives and to think about the scope and scale of our professional goals, realizing that whatever that scope and scale is, it's for that moment in time. It can always change. But if I realize, for instance, that I need to keep my stress down and I have a lot of caregiving responsibilities and I'm also trying to finish up a degree, I'm likely not going to go for a job that says, more than 50% of travel away from my home because that's just not sustainable. And I'm being honest with myself about the scope and scale of my professional goals. So I'm looking at positions and opportunities, whether it's an employment opportunity, let's say your internship opportunity, and that also goes for scholarships and fellowships as well, to look at those sets of required criteria, job requirements, other criteria that might pertain to a scholarship or fellowship, and to do a very honest self-assessment of, can I handle this? And the can I handle this question is not if I'm smart enough to do this, it's more so, do I have the capacity, the physical strength, the mental capability in terms of not being too stressed out, the emotional capacity, do I have a support network that can maybe provide some of those other aspects that I need to be successful in this? And so it's important to think about that. It's important to relate that when you're thinking about sharing your professional story. And there's no shame in saying, like, for right now, maybe eventually I'll be a CEO, but for right now, I'd love to support a CEO because I have these other things to consider and I'm trying to maintain work-life balance. That's the other thing about a resume as well, thinking about going for different opportunities, whether they're employment related, internship related, scholarship or fellowship related. It's also being very honest about where I am in my life, how I choose to be healthy in all aspects, how I maintain life and work balance, and how I show up authentically, even in my resume, to do that and to convey that. Along with your resume, thinking about your professional story, we all have areas where we can learn. So if you feel that you have any knowledge or work experience gaps that relate directly, let's say, to the position for which you're applying, whether it's employment, internship, scholarship, or fellowship, unless it is a criterion that says for that opportunity, don't apply unless you meet this minimum. But if it's kind of open-ended, like if there are any gaps, other experience will be considered. Take that opportunity to explain, to share that story. You might even acknowledge, I know I have in different situations where I've said, I am not familiar, or I do not have the expertise level that is described in this, let's say, job description yet. But then I will identify ways that I'm already deciding to maybe address that knowledge gap or that gap in experience. Maybe it says you need a minimum 3 years work experience, but I have 2.5. It's really close. And so I might say, although I do not meet the minimum 3 years experience in whatever category, I have 2 years and 8 months, and I'm actively doing whatever I'm doing. Let's say I'm taking online courses. Let's say I'm going to be attending a professional conference. Whatever the case may be. Again, I'm showing up authentically. I'm not feeling bad about myself, but I'm also being very honest and sincere in conveying where I'm at and what I intend to do to be able to meet those types of expectations. I'm sharing my story. I'm inviting people into my life. and sharing with them, how I'm choosing to be proactive, let's say in addressing a particular knowledge or work experience gap. And when we think about when we are, again, showcasing our truest, authentic, and best self to whoever is reviewing our resume, it's important that we are honest and that we are thorough in talking about our skills and our achievements. And one trick that I've learned over the years to do that I really appreciate doing, and it's not something that I dreamed of, and it's not even something that I saw, let's say, in certain online forums. In fact, it was a hard copy of a resume of a person that I saw, about 15 years ago at this point, maybe even longer, 17 years. And I looked at this person's resume, and at the time, this person, Native woman, very intelligent within a computer science and engineering field. And I looked at her resume. I had an opportunity to look at a hard copy of her resume. And I noticed that beyond just saying, what she was required to do, the job requirements of her job, she would attach what I'm going to call value to what she did. So let's say she was responsible for ensuring, the up-to-date nature of a particular computer mainframe and making sure that it runs properly. So she's concerned, not worried. Concerned and focused upon, let's say, efficiency, consistency. But beyond just saying I really care about efficiency and consistency, she was able to talk about how she improved efficiency, let's say in that particular role by a certain percentage, like 30%, or how, she maintained a certain level of consistency. And I was so inspired by that. I'm like, I want to do that. So here we have, some suggestions for you to consider. You might include numbers and percentages to demonstrate that type of value added to your work. So for instance, I was chatting with a scholar only worked, so far in food service related capacities. I said, okay, well, tell me about that. Well, I work in drive-throughs. And I said, okay, well, that's fascinating. I go through drive-throughs. So let's discuss. And so this person's like, well, what is there to discuss? I work in drive-throughs. I was like, so can that be stressful? Very. I said, what about it can be stressful? Well, the volume of people that I work with. I'm like, well, let's talk about that. And so in talking about that, we came to realize that this person actually had an enormous amount of skill related to efficiency, to hearing information, processing it, conveying that information accurately and efficiently. And so instead of, that person maybe minimizing of, I've only worked in a drive-through setting, we're able to really showcase and highlight and not just say, things I care about are efficiency and accuracy, but to demonstrate I really do, and this is what I do all the time. So here you see a little example of the phrasing that we use. Interface with 200 plus customers with 99% order accuracy in a typical 4-hour shift. And all of that information was true and accurate. It wasn't an exaggeration. It wasn't overselling. It was also, though, being very honest about the skills and abilities that person has, and not to minimize of I only work drive-through, but rather I am the public face, let's say, of this particular fast food service. And people are hungry, probably crabby, they might even be hangry in the drive-through line. So I need to make sure that they get their order, that they're satisfied, that we don't get a bunch of complaints, because that could reflect not only poorly on me as a person, but upon, the organization. So again, thinking about whatever you do, I encourage you, don't minimize it and think, I only or I just, but really think about what do you do? And if you can attach maybe some of those numbers to it, numbers that you feel confident, as I say, that you can say it with a straight face. If you can say it with a straight face, well then it's believable. You're maintaining that honesty and that integrity about who you are and what you have to offer. I also encourage people to list their first and the best. If you were the first to do something or to introduce something, whether as an individual or part of a team, maybe you helped co-create something, say it. Please say it. If you were acknowledged, if you received some type of award, whether it's Employee of the Month or Person of the Year, whatever the case may be, say that as well. And regardless of what type of setting we're talking about, whether it's a school setting or whether it's a work setting, whether that work is paid or volunteer work, include that. Include your first and your best. So here's an example of a first that I worked to try to phrase with somebody. This person co-created the first LGBTQIA2 Spirit Plus 50-member student organization. So this person is part of a first. They were not the only, they helped co-create it. But again, we're also giving an idea of scope. This is a 50-member student organization. That's a little bit different, let's say, from a 5-member student organization. That's also very helpful. Another example, you see promoted to a supervisory role for 3 staff within 9 months of being hired. So really showing that this person has incentive and motivation, has demonstrated leadership qualities in less than a year in their role, to a supervisory role, and we know the number of staff. We know the time frame in which this person, let's say, was promoted. So that's just an example of things to think about when you're talking about your first, your best, your accomplishments, things that really demonstrate what you have to offer. And lastly, that final goal before, let's say you, I'm going to say get hired, but you might have multiple opportunities. We hope. So at least, for this initial resume, we're gonna say the end goal is schedule an interview. Beyond that, let's say there's an offer of employment or an offer of an internship, or let's say here's some free money through a scholarship, or here's a wonderful scholarly opportunity through a fellowship, whatever the case may be. But for this purpose, we're just going to say that goal right now is to get that interview, whether that's an in-person interview, so you're physically showing up, let's say at a location or an office. Maybe it's an online interview. Maybe you're on Zoom or on Teams or some other platform. Maybe it's a phone call, whatever the case may be. But really with that, feeling confident about the resume that you have created. Why? Because you have shown up as your authentic self. You have thought about what really matters to you. You've thought about what matters to you, what this organization says matters to them. You've seen where there's commonalities, and then you can speak with confidence and assurance and demonstrate why you are their ideal person, to hire or to award, for instance. So when you secure that interview, in whatever format it is, you want to be able to share maybe even some of your current things that are happening that you're pursuing, whether it's for work or if it's for research, whatever type of interest that you have. So you want to be able to also think about not just what you've done in the past, but your present goals, your current work focus, and any recent accomplishments. You might have something that was done that happened between when you submitted the resume and when you got the interview scheduled. So we want to allow for that as well. You also want to explain how your past work accomplishments have prepared you for success in this new role. So we're entering into this about, the mentality that we are going to be successful. And you also want to describe how your future goals will help that employer or organization reach their goals as well. And I'm going to pause here for just a moment. Again, I apologize that I cannot hear you. I'm glad that you can hear me, but I see my colleague Jack has a couple things to share about some questions in the chat. So Jack, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Veronica. So we had a couple of questions, and I did want to highlight a little bit of my responses to Jai and to Elena, or Jay. I'm sorry, Jay, if I was saying your name wrong. The question was, as a high school student, what should I put into my resume? And I think that, when you get down to the bare bones of it, there are lists of things that you can highlight or consider in reference to skills, because most of the time, you feel like mopping the floors or talking to people or being counter help are not enough of a skill set, but you have to remember that you're talking to people as counter help and you're organizing probably, a variety of different things in reference to the cleaning supplies, being able to come in. You're probably sort of doing some inadvertent type of, ordering, telling people like we're low on this. So in addition to sort of mopping the floors, you're sort of like being helpful in a number of ways that really demonstrate some of the capacity for you to be, I won't say in a leadership role, but your organizational skills, your awareness skills, your capacity to be able to talk to people, and I highlight this often, waiting tables and talking to people and counter help is probably one of the best trainings that you'll ever get in reference to sort of doing interpersonal and people, development, because you're trying to, coach them through the process of, so you're here ordering a hot dog, and that may seem sort of boring, but like you're walking them through the whole process of, okay, let me help you make a decision. Now, do you want things on that? Or, and then it's going to cost, and then you work through the money, the exchange, you're doing some basic accounting. So there's just a number of things that really are overlooked when you think about high school positions or work during high school. And then for Elena, she asked about, is coursework important? It is, but it has to pertain to the job. So let's say that you are applying for an engineering job and you have some really good coursework and research within engineering. You should totally highlight that, but don't make that the point. And I think that, to her question too, she doesn't have a lot of lab work and she didn't do a lot of internship or experiential education. That's helpful. But I also think too, one of the most we have a resource called Focus 2. You can go in and build a profile, and you can look at positions that may have that you're applying for to see what they're looking for. And then also you could talk to people. So if you're talking and you're applying for an engineering job, you should reach out to maybe somebody who that sort of like does that work, or do some research. You could Google engineer skills, and then learn a little bit more about what could be really important to that position that you're applying for, and then add that to your resume. But also too, as Veronica said, you only have basically 2 to 3 seconds to sort of get a attracted, feeling from the person who's looking at your resume. So you look at that, that professional summary at the beginning. That's kind of your little, I won't say pitch because that kind of feels weird, but like that lists a little bit of like who you are. Like, I am a native professional looking to develop my skills in engineering, knowing that I have X, Y, and years in this as a person who has done research, presentations, whatever. So you have 3 to 5 sentences that you could build in at the very beginning that give a little bit more of a highlight. And if you don't have a lot of, I guess, experience or other words to add to your professional story, that could be the trigger that at least sort of invites them to think about you as you're moving forward. And then Leah just asked a question here, or Liel, sorry, however you say your name, my apologies. If I worked multiple positions with a company, would the different positions be in their individual sections? No, but I would. There are 2 ways you can do this. One, you can highlight the company and then list each of the positions that you did. Or, this is something that I've done where I've highlighted the company, and then, I was an intern, I was a community assistant, I was, a team organizer, and then I became the director of the program. So you could list each of those and then sort of highlight the things that you think are most relevant. But the thing that I would encourage you is to do no more than 2 to 3 bullets per position. But if you're thinking again about all the things that you've learned in that position or in that job, I would think about incorporating some of the skills that you've created and developed, and and the exposure to the professional sort of world in your professional summary. That would be at the very front end of your resume. So Lial, if that was helpful for you, just let me know. And if you have any other questions, I put my email into the chat here, jsoto@collegefund.org. You can reach out to me or Veronica. We're both available. But I'm going to turn it back over to Veronica to sort of like give her time to do any other talking through. I think she has a few more points, and then we'll be done.
Okay, I see Jack's mouth has stopped moving. This has been interesting to say the least. I do have, I think, at most 2 more slides, which I'm going to cover very quickly. Actually, they might even just be informational. They are. So here is our contact information. And I'm so happy. Thank you, Jack, for providing your email address in the chat. I'm also going to copy paste my email address in this chat as well. But again, with that, if there are any additional questions, please reach out to us. I promise that if you call me on my office phone, that will work. But I just want to thank you so much for your time and attention. If there are any additional questions, we'll look for them in the chat. But with that, I'm going to say, thank you so much for your time and your attention.
Yes, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for bearing with us through this. I don't think we did too bad, and she did a great job of walking through this blindly. And thank you all for your questions. I saw in the poll that at least half of you have a resume, which is good, and a few of you are looking to update them. If you need any support from us, just let us know. We have given you our email addresses, and we'd be more than happy to be supportive. So farewell in both the see you later and then also just in general of have a great time at the event today. We'll be presenting later on today and probably the same information. So thank you all again.